Lieutenant Jessica Carver had survived 2 tours coordinating supply chains across 12 star systems, and not once had anyone tried to kill her. Until today. Which was ironic, considering she was supposed to be on the safest assignment in the galaxy, babysitting Ambassador Richard Pemberton during a routine diplomatic meeting. Routine. That word should have been a warning sign. The Kralix Dominion's landing bay was impressive in the way that everything militaristic species build tends to be impressive. Lots of metal, aggressive architecture, and enough weapons pointed at visitors to make everyone nervous. Jess stood 2 steps behind Ambassador Pemberton, watching him adjust his formal robes for the 17th time. The man was a walking disaster in expensive fabric. "Remember, Ambassador," Jess said quietly, "the Kralix value directness and respect for hierarchy. No flowery language, no jokes, and definitely do not touch anyone." Pemberton waved her off. "I have been doing this for 20 years, Lieutenant. I think I can handle a simple meet and greet." Famous last words. The Kralix Supreme Commander, a 7-foot-tall reptilian nightmare named Gorthax, descended from his platform with the kind of presence that made smart people reconsider their life choices. His scales were battle-scarred, his eyes were cold, and his ceremonial armor looked like it had actually seen combat, which apparently was the Kralix version of formal wear. Ambassador Pemberton stepped forward and did the one thing, the single thing, Jess had specifically told him not to do. He extended his hand for a handshake, to a species where physical contact initiated combat challenges. Gorthax stared at the outstretched hand like Pemberton had just offered him a live grenade. "I come in peace," Pemberton announced, somehow making it sound condescending. "Representing humanity and the Galactic Coalition, we hope to establish a mutually beneficial relationship between our people." Jess watched the translator devices struggle with the word salad. The Kralix guards shifted, hands moving toward weapons. "You offer challenge?" Gorthax rumbled. "What?" "No, I am offering friendship." "You extend dominance gesture. This is challenge." Pemberton laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, you misunderstand. Humans shake hands as a greeting. It is quite harmless." The temperature in the room dropped about 40 degrees. Gorthax's eyes narrowed to slits. "You call Kralix custom understanding insufficient?" Jess stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. "Supreme Commander, the Ambassador meant no disrespect. This is a cultural misunderstanding, nothing more." Gorthax ignored her completely. His attention was fixed on Pemberton, who still had not lowered his stupid hand. "You insult Kralix intelligence. You offer combat gesture. You laugh at our ways." Gorthax's voice went dangerously quiet. "You are either warrior or fool. Now see here," Pemberton blustered, finally lowering his hand. "I am a diplomatic representative, and I demand, guards, imprison them." The Kralix moved fast. Jess's security detail barely had time to reach for their weapons before they were disarmed and surrounded. 18 guards, all armed, all looking like they really hoped someone would resist. Jess caught the eye of Sergeant Rodriguez, her head of security, and shook her head slightly. No heroics. Not yet. Within 3 minutes, their entire delegation was stripped of weapons, communication devices, and dignity. Gorthax watched with the expression of someone who had just squashed a particularly annoying insect. "You are now prisoners of the Kralix Dominion," he declared. "You will remain so until we decide your worth." "This is an act of war," Pemberton squeaked. "War requires worthy opponents," Gorthax replied. "You are merely prisoners." As they were marched toward the holding cells, Jess mentally revised her survival statistics. 2 tours, 0 combat incidents. 1 diplomatic mission, immediate imprisonment. At this rate, she would be safer back in the shipping lanes dodging asteroid fields. Ambassador Pemberton was still talking, still demanding, still somehow missing the fact that literally no one cared. Jess tuned him out and started doing what she did best. Logistics. Current situation, imprisoned on hostile station, no weapons, no communications, and no backup plan. Available resources, 1 useless ambassador, 6 security personnel, and whatever she could improvise. The math was not encouraging. The holding cell door slammed shut with a finality that suggested the Kralix had done this before, probably often. Pemberton immediately began pacing and muttering about protocols and interstellar law. Jess sat down on the metal bench and started planning. Because logistics was not just about moving supplies from point A to point B, it was about solving problems with limited resources, and right now, their resources were extremely limited. The holding cell was exactly what you would expect from a militaristic species obsessed with hierarchy and combat. Spartan, uncomfortable, and designed to make prisoners contemplate their poor life choices. Jess had been contemplating for about 30 minutes when Ambassador Pemberton finally stopped pacing long enough to panic properly. "This is unacceptable," he announced to no one in particular. "I am a diplomatic representative. There are protocols, procedures. The coalition will hear about this." Jess, who had been examining the cell's ventilation system for weaknesses, did not look up. "The coalition is approximately 14 light-years away and thinks we are having tea with the Supreme Commander right now. No one is coming to help us. Then we demand to speak to someone in charge. We are prisoners of war according to a species that did not realize we are not actually at war. I do not think demands are going to help." Pemberton sputtered. "We are not warriors. I am a diplomat. You are a logistics officer. This is clearly a mistake." Before Jess could point out that the mistake had been entirely his fault, the cell door opened with a pneumatic hiss. A Kralix warrior entered, even larger than the Supreme Commander, with scales that looked like they had been personally introduced to every weapon in the galaxy. His right eye was scarred over, and his ceremonial markings indicated high rank. "I am Commander Thrak," he announced, his voice like gravel being processed in a cement mixer. "I process prisoners. You will submit to classification scan." He held up a device that looked like a tablet had a baby with a medical scanner. Pemberton immediately stepped forward. "Now see here, Commander. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. I am Ambassador Richard Pemberton of Earth, and I demand immediate release and a formal apology from your Supreme Commander." Thrak stared at him with the expression of someone trying to understand why the small creature was making noise. He pointed the scanner at Pemberton. It beeped twice, displayed some information, and Thrak's scarred face split into what might have been a smile, or a threat display. Hard to tell with reptiles. Classification, non-threat. Subcategory, diplomatic waste of space. Thrak looked genuinely amused. Your combat capability is 0.03, lower than Sclerian infant. Pemberton turned an interesting shade of purple. How dare you? Accurate assessment, Thrak interrupted. You are no warrior. You are not even adequate prey. He turned to Jess. You, step forward. Jess stood and approached, keeping her movements calm and non-threatening. Thrak pointed the scanner at her. It beeped once, then twice, then made a sound that was definitely not normal. The screen flickered. Thrak frowned, tapped the device, and scanned her again. Same result. The scanner's screen displayed a string of error messages and then, almost reluctantly, produced a classification. Unarmed female, Thrak read, his voice flat with disappointment. Lowest classification. No combat capability detected. No threat assessment possible. You are... He paused, searching for the word. Harmless. Jess raised an eyebrow. Your scanner does not seem very confident about that. Scanner is Kralix technology. Best in galaxy. If it says you are harmless, you are harmless. But he sounded uncertain. The device was still beeping error messages. Let me guess, Jess said. Your scanner has never analyzed a human before. We are new to the coalition, so your database has no baseline for our species. Thrak's frown deepened. Technology adapts, analyzes biological markers, muscle density, neural patterns. It does not make errors. It does if it has nothing to compare the data to. Your scanner is trying to classify me using standards built for species you actually know. Humans do not fit your categories. All species fit categories, Thrak insisted. Warrior, hunter, prey, support. You are... He glanced at the screen again. Unarmed female. This is clear. The way he said it made it obvious that in Kralix culture, This was roughly equivalent to calling someone decorative furniture. Jess decided not to argue. Being underestimated was better than being considered a threat. For now. Thrak deactivated the scanner and headed for the door. You will remain here until Dominion decides your fate. Do not attempt escape. Guards will stun first. Ask questions never. He paused at the doorway. Diplomatic waste of space and unarmed female. The humans send such as these to represent them. He made a sound that might have been Kralix's laughter. Your species will not last long in Galaxy. The door sealed behind him. Ambassador Pemberton immediately began ranting about the insult, the classification, the absolute audacity. Jess tuned him out and sat back down on the bench. Unarmed female. The scanner had classified her as harmless, as the lowest possible threat rating. The Kralix now thought she was about as dangerous as a houseplant. Perfect. Because the thing about logistics was that it taught you to work with what you had, not what you wished you had. And what she had right now was the element of surprise wrapped in a package labeled completely harmless. She just needed the right opportunity to demonstrate why human classifications were meaningless. The opportunity arrived faster than expected, and naturally, it came with terrible timing and worse circumstances. Jess was in the middle of actually sleeping, having spent the previous day convincing Ambassador Pemberton that pounding on the cell door and demanding lawyers would not improve their situation, when Kralix guards arrived to escort them somewhere new. "Where are you taking us?" Pemberton demanded, stumbling as the guards dragged him forward. The guards did not answer. They never did. Jess was starting to think the Kralix had a policy about not wasting words on prisoners classified as non-threatening. They were marched through corridors that gradually became larger, grander, and significantly louder. The sound of a crowd grew from a distant rumble to a roar, and Jess realized where they were going approximately 3 seconds before the doors opened onto the grand arena. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," she muttered. The arena was massive, built into what appeared to be a natural crater, and surrounded by stadium seating packed with thousands of Kralix. The floor was sand and stone, stained with substances Jess decided not to think about too hard. Weapons racks lined the walls. This was not a sports venue. This was a coliseum. The prisoners were shoved into a viewing box, essentially a cage with a good view of the killing floor. Commander Thrak was already there, along with several other high-ranking Kralix who looked like they had personally wrestled their way up the command structure. "Why are we here?" Pemberton asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Entertainment," Thrak replied. "Kralix value strength. We demonstrate this through combat trials. Prisoners watch, learn their place in hierarchy. We are not going to fight in your barbaric games," Pemberton announced. "Correct. You are not worthy of arena." Thrak gestured to the floor below, where 2 massive Kralix warriors were circling each other with weapons drawn. "You watch. You understand why Kralix are superior. Then maybe you appreciate your prisoner status as mercy." The fight began, brutal and efficient. The crowd roared. Jess watched, not the combat, but the crowd's reaction, the structure of the arena, the weapon placements. Always assess resources, always plan ahead. The matches continued. Kralix versus Kralix, then Kralix versus warriors from other species, all prisoners or volunteers seeking honor. Every fight ended the same way. The Kralix won. This was less about competition and more about propaganda. Halfway through the third match, a heavily intoxicated Kralix officer named Vector stumbled into their viewing box. He was large, even by Kralix standards, with ceremonial markings that suggested more privilege than competence. "Ah, the human prisoners," Vector slurred, his breath smelling like fermented something. "Look at them, small, weak, soft." He leaned closer to Jess, invading her personal space with the confidence of someone who had never experienced consequences. "Female one is almost decorative, like trophy. Perhaps I keep as souvenir." Jess did not react. Reacting would be counterproductive. Ambassador Pemberton, however, had apparently discovered his spine at the worst possible moment. "That is completely inappropriate," Pemberton snapped. "You will address her with respect or not at all." Vector turned slowly, his eyes focusing with difficulty on the ambassador. Diplomatic waste of space has opinions. This is amusing. I am a representative of Earth and the Galactic Coalition, and I will not tolerate such crude behavior toward my staff. The viewing box went quiet. Even the drunk Kralix officer seemed to sober slightly. Thrak leaned forward, suddenly very interested. You challenge me? Vector asked, his voice dropping to something dangerous. I am saying you should learn proper etiquette before. Challenge accepted. Vector stood to his full height. I invoke arena rights. You face me in combat. We settle this properly. Pemberton went pale. What? No, I did not challenge you to anything. You questioned my honor. You demanded I change behavior. This is challenge. Kralix law is clear. Vector turned to Thrak. Commander, you witness? Thrak nodded slowly. Witnessed. Combat is valid. Challenger may choose warrior or proxy. I am not fighting you, Pemberton stammered. This is insane. Then you die as coward, Vector said simply. Perhaps I take decorative female anyway, as consolation prize. Jess made a calculation. Pemberton would last approximately 15 seconds in the arena, and then she would be stuck here, alone, with a drunk Kralix officer who viewed her as property. The coalition would eventually negotiate their release, but eventually was not soon enough. She stood. I will be his proxy. Every Kralix in the viewing box turned to stare at her. Even Vector looked confused. You? Vector said finally. Unarmed female. Yes. You cannot fight. Scanner says you are harmless. Then this should be quick and easy for you. Jess met his eyes. Unless you are afraid of losing to someone classified as decorative. Vector's expression went from confusion to anger to something that might have been excitement. He laughed, loud and harsh. This is gift. I fight harmless female. I prove dominance. Entertainment value is high. He turned to Thrak. I accept proxy. Prepare arena. Thrak stood slowly, his scarred face unreadable. You understand what you do? Arena combat is to unconsciousness or death. There is no mercy rule. Understood, Jess replied. You have no weapons training, no combat classification. You will die. Maybe. Why do this? Jess glanced at Ambassador Pemberton, who looked like he was about to faint. Because someone has to. Might as well be me. Thrak studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You have courage. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. This will be remembered. As guards escorted her toward the arena floor, Jess did some quick mental calculations. Vector was larger, stronger, armed, and trained. She was none of those things. But logistics was not about having advantages. It was about using what you had to achieve objectives despite limitations. And what she had was a species-wide advantage the Kralix did not understand yet. Humans did not evolve to be the strongest predators. They evolved to be the most annoying ones. Time to demonstrate why endurance hunters were the worst thing to fight in any arena. The arena sand felt wrong under Jess's boots. Too loose, no traction, deliberately chosen to make footing unpredictable. The crowd's roar was deafening. Thousands of Kralix warriors who had come to watch combat and were now getting an unexpected comedy show. Unarmed female versus decorated officer. The betting odds were probably hilarious. Vector stood across from her, wearing ceremonial combat armor and carrying two Kralix blades that looked like someone had decided swords needed more edges and fewer safety features. He was swaying slightly, still drunk, but unfortunately for Jess, the Kralix appeared to have biology that processed alcohol slowly. He was impaired, but functional. The arena master, a scarred veteran with more medals than scales, stepped forward. Combat rules. Fight until unconsciousness or death. No interference, no mercy. Victory brings honor. He paused, glancing at Jess. Though in this case, defeat is forgiven. You are outmatched, human. There is no shame in surrender before blood. Appreciate the concern, Jess replied. Let us just get this started. The arena master shrugged, raised his hand, and dropped it. The fight began. Vector charged immediately, blades raised, clearly intending to end this in one dramatic strike. It would have been effective against a traditional opponent. Against a human who had spent 2 months training in low-gravity combat procedures, it was predictable. Jess sidestepped, let momentum carry Vector past her, and kicked sand directly into his face. The crowd gasped. Vector roared, stumbling, blinking furiously. Fighting dirty was apparently not standard Kralix procedure. Good. Humans had built their entire combat doctrine on not standard procedure. Vector recovered quickly, snarling. He came at her again, slower this time, more cautious. Jess backed away, circling, keeping distance. She had no intention of getting close to those blades. Instead, she watched his footwork, his breathing, his patterns. The thing about ceremonial combat was that it looked impressive but followed rules, structure, tradition. Vector had been trained to fight opponents who fought back properly. Jess had been trained in logistics, self-defense, and most importantly, asteroid field survival procedures, which meant her entire combat philosophy was, do whatever keeps you alive longest. She grabbed a handful of sand and threw it again. Vector blocked with his arm this time, anticipating. She used the distraction to grab a fist-sized rock from the arena floor and hurled it at his knee. It connected. Vector stumbled. "You fight like coward," he snarled. "I fight like someone who wants to win," Jess corrected. She kept moving, kept circling. Vector was strong but heavy. The armor that protected him also slowed him down. And he was still drunk, his reactions just a fraction of a second delayed. Jess started exploiting that delay. Feint left, move right, throw sand, throw rocks, stay out of blade range, make him chase, make him angry, make him sloppy. The crowd's roar shifted from amusement to confusion. This was not how combat worked. Where was the honor? The direct confrontation? The glorious melee? Jess did not care about honor. She cared about not dying. Vector's breathing was getting heavier. The armor, the weapons, the alcohol, and the constant movement were taking their toll. Humans were endurance hunters. They did not need to be stronger. They just needed to outlast. "Stand still and fight," Vector roared. "No," Jess replied simply. She grabbed another rock, bigger this time, and threw it at his head. Vector blocked with his blade, the rock shattering. Jess used that second to close distance and kick his knee hard at the joint where armor plates met. Vector howled and swung wildly. She was already gone, rolling away through the sand. 3 minutes passed, then 5. Vector's swings were getting slower, his charges less coordinated. The crowd had gone from roaring to murmuring. This was not entertainment. This was weird. Jess kept the pressure on. Sand in the eyes, rocks at joints, constant movement. She was breathing hard, covered in sand and sweat, but Vector was struggling. His armor, designed to look impressive and deflect blades, was cooking him alive in the arena heat. At the 7-minute mark, Vector made a mistake. He overcommitted to a swing, stumbled in the loose sand, and went down on one knee. Jess did not hesitate. She grabbed one of his dropped blades, stepped behind him, and put the edge against his throat. The arena went silent. "Yield," Jess said quietly. Vector's breathing was ragged. His pride warred with his survival instinct for approximately 2 seconds. "I yield," he growled. Jess released him and stepped back. The arena master stared at her like she had just juggled stars while reciting poetry. The crowd did not know whether to cheer or riot. Commander Thrak descended to the arena floor, his expression unreadable. He was carrying the classification scanner. "That should not have been possible," he said. And yet, he pointed the scanner at her again. This time it did not just beep errors. It beeped errors, recalculated, beeped more errors, and then finally produced a new classification with what sounded like digital reluctance. Thrak read the screen. His expression shifted from confusion to something that might have been concern. "Battlefield variable," he read aloud. "Classification unprecedented. Subject demonstrates unpredictable combat methodology. Threat assessment, unable to determine. Recommended action, approach with extreme caution." He looked at Jess. "What are you?" "Logistics officer," Jess replied. "Supply chain coordination specialist. I file paperwork and make sure shipments arrive on time." That is not warrior training? Correct. Then how? Humans do not fit your categories, Commander. I tried to tell you that. Thrak stared at the scanner, then at Jess, then at Vector, who was being helped to his feet by arena attendants. If this is what unarmed human does, what do your warriors do? I really hope you never have to find out, Jess said honestly. Jess had hoped that beating a drunk Kralix officer in the arena would be the end of the situation. Perhaps they would acknowledge the misunderstanding, apologize for the diplomatic incident, and everyone could move on with their lives. But she had forgotten that hope was a poor strategy, and the universe had a terrible sense of humor. Supreme Commander Gorthax apparently viewed her arena victory not as a reason to release them, but as an opportunity for entertainment. Within an hour of the fight, Jess was summoned to his command chamber, where he delivered the worst possible news with the enthusiasm of someone offering a gift. You have proven you are not harmless, Gorthax announced. This is good. Means you are worth proper testing. You will face 3 trials, win all 3, and humans earn respect. Dominion will release you and formally acknowledge your species in coalition hierarchy. Fail, and you remain prisoners until we decide otherwise. Or I could just stay in the cell, Jess suggested. You could. But Ambassador Diplomatic Waste of Space will remain our guest indefinitely. He insulted Kralix honor. This debt must be paid. Jess glanced at Pemberton, who looked like he wanted to argue but had finally learned when to keep quiet. She did the math. 3 fights versus indefinite imprisonment. The odds were terrible either way, but at least fighting gave them a chance. Fine, she said. What are the trials? You will see, Gorthax replied, smiling in that way predators do when they know something you don't. First trial is tomorrow. Prepare yourself, battlefield variable. The first trial turned out to be against Champion Kralix, a Kralix warrior who apparently held 17 arena titles and had a fan club. He was massive, covered in armor that looked like it had been built by someone who thought you had too much protection. Was not a real concern. And carrying a weapon that was technically classified as a hammer, but resembled a building demolition tool. The arena master explained the rules. Combat until incapacitation, no surrender, no proxy, begin. Champion Kralix charged, and Jess immediately recognized the problem. She could not hurt him. The armor was complete, overlapping plates that covered everything. Her previous strategy of targeting weak points would not work because there were no weak points. So she did not try to hurt him, she just ran. Kralix pursued, hammer swinging, each impact cratering the arena floor. Jess stayed ahead, barely, using speed and direction changes to avoid being pulverized. The crowd was booing now, frustrated by the lack of direct combat. 10 minutes passed. Kralix was still coming, but his breathing was audible now through the armor. 15 minutes. He was slowing down. 20 minutes. He was overheating. Jess had figured out the flaw. The armor was perfect protection, which meant it also trapped heat perfectly. Kralix was essentially fighting inside an oven. At the 25-minute mark, he collapsed from heat exhaustion. Victory by enemy defeat. The crowd hated it. Gorthax looked annoyed but nodded. Trial 1 complete. The second trial was somehow worse. They released a Thragar, a massive 6-legged predator from a death world, into the arena. It had scales like armor, claws like swords, and absolutely no interest in following anyone's rules. The crowd cheered. This was proper entertainment. Jess watched the creature pace, studying its behavior. It moved like an ambush predator, stalking, watching, waiting for weakness. She recognized the pattern from academy training on hostile fauna. The Thragar was not mindlessly aggressive. It was intelligent. So she stopped running and started observing how it tracked movement, what sounds it responded to, whether it preferred certain prey behaviors. The Thragar circled her, confused by her lack of fear response. Jess started making rhythmic sounds, repeating patterns. The Thragar's head tilted. She changed position slowly, predictably. The creature stopped stalking and started following, curious. She maintained the pattern, keeping movements calm, non-threatening, but not prey-like either. After 20 minutes, the Thragar was basically walking beside her like a very large, very deadly dog. The crowd was silent, baffled. Gorthax stood up from his observation box. What is she doing? he demanded. Commander Thrak, watching through scanning equipment, sounded equally confused. She is communicating? No. She is establishing behavioral dominance through pattern recognition and psychological manipulation. The Thragger thinks she is not prey. Is that allowed? There is no rule against it. Jess eventually led the Thragor to the arena exit where handlers managed to secure it and remove it from the floor. She turned to Gorthax and shrugged. Trial 2 complete. The Supreme Commander looked personally offended. That was not combat. You said incapacitation. You did not specify method. The third trial was scheduled for the following day. Jess was escorted back to her cell, where Ambassador Pemberton greeted her with newfound respect and many questions she was too tired to answer. She slept poorly, knowing that the Kralix would not make the next trial so easily exploitable. She was correct. The final trial was a team battle. Jess was given 4 Kralix warriors, all prisoners or disgraced soldiers, and told to lead them against Commander Thrak's elite unit in a tactical combat scenario. The objective was to capture 3 strategic points in a mock battlefield environment built inside the arena. Her team was a disaster. 1 warrior had been demoted for cowardice. Another had lost rank for disobeying orders. The third was too aggressive. The fourth could not work with others. They hated each other and respected Jess even less. But Jess was a logistics officer, and logistics was all about making dysfunctional systems produce functional results. She spent an hour studying Thrak's previous tactics, watching recordings the Kralix helpfully provided. She identified his patterns: aggressive, overwhelming force at primary objectives, minimal defense at secondary positions. When the trial began, Jess did not try to outfight Thrak. She outthought him. She sent her aggressive warrior to make noise at the primary objective, drawing Thrak's attention. Meanwhile, she took the coward, who was excellent at stealth, and the 2 others to quietly capture the undefended secondary points. Thrak realized too late that he had committed all forces to stopping a distraction. By the time he repositioned, Jess's team held 2 objectives. They fortified, used defensive advantages, and held position until time expired. Victory through strategy. The crowd actually cheered this time. Even Gorthax looked impressed. Thrak approached Jess after the match, his expression thoughtful. "You fight like no warrior I have seen," he said. "Because I am not a warrior," Jess replied. "I am a logistics officer. I solve problems with available resources." "And you see soldiers as resources?" "I see everything as resources, including time, attention, and assumptions." Thrak nodded slowly. "This is why Scanner calls you battlefield variable. You cannot be predicted because you do not follow warrior patterns." "Exactly. This makes you dangerous. Or useful, depending on perspective." Supreme Commander Gorthax kept his word, which Jess appreciated because she had fully expected him to add just 1 more trial, until someone finally got killed. Instead, he summoned her to his command chamber for the 3rd time, and this time, Ambassador Pemberton was invited as well. "You have completed 3 trials," Gorthax announced formally. "You have demonstrated capabilities that defy standard classification. The Kralix Dominion acknowledges that humans do not fit expected categories." He paused, looking like the admission physically pained him. "We were incorrect in our initial assessment." Pemberton, who had apparently recovered both his spine and his diplomatic training during their imprisonment, stepped forward. "The Galactic Coalition will be pleased to hear that this unfortunate incident can be resolved peacefully. Earth looks forward to establishing proper diplomatic relations with the Kralix Dominion, built on mutual respect and cultural understanding." "Yes, yes," Gorthax waved dismissively. "You may have your diplomatic relations. But first we must update records." He gestured to Commander Thrak, who approached with a data tablet. "Humanity's classification has been updated in Kralix database," Thrak explained. "Original designation was unproven species, minimal threat assessment. This was clearly inadequate." "What is the new designation?" Jess asked. Thrak's scarred face might have shown amusement. "Hard to tell. Approach with caution. Combat methodology unpredictable. Threat assessment variable. Formal recommendation: do not engage humans in combat scenarios without extensive preparation and contingency planning." You are labeling my entire species as dangerous? Pemberton sounded simultaneously offended and proud. We are labeling your species as unpredictable, Gorthax corrected, which is more dangerous than simple combat capability. A warrior, we understand. A warrior, we can fight. But a species that treats combat as puzzle to solve rather than honor to prove? This is concerning. I will take that as a compliment, Jess said. It is not compliment, it is warning. For us and for other coalition species. Thrak deactivated the tablet. You are free to leave. Your ship has been refueled and resupplied as apology for diplomatic misunderstanding. Your security team's weapons have been returned. We will submit formal recognition of humanity's coalition status. Just like that? Pemberton asked suspiciously. Just like that, Gorthax confirmed. We Kralix value strength and honor, yes. But we also value knowing which battles to fight. Humans are battle we do not need. You are better as allies than enemies. Smart choice, Jess agreed. As they were escorted back to their ship, Commander Thrak walked alongside Jess. May I ask one question, Lieutenant Carver? Sure. Your military rank is logistics officer, supply chain coordination. This is truly non-combat position. Completely non-combat. I make sure ships get fuel and food arrives on time. Very boring work. Thrak was quiet for a moment. What rank is human combat specialist? Your Marines? Your soldiers? Why do you ask? Because if logistics officer can do what you did, I am concerned about what your warriors can do. Jess smiled. Commander, the nice thing about being a logistics officer is that I know exactly what our Marines are capable of. And I can tell you, with complete honesty, you really do not want to find out personally. This is what I feared, Thrak muttered. At the ship, Ambassador Pemberton immediately headed for his quarters, presumably to write a very long report about how he had heroically negotiated their release through diplomatic brilliance. Jess let him have that fantasy. She was too tired to care about credit. Sergeant Rodriguez met her at the airlock, looking relieved. Lieutenant, good to see you alive. We heard about the arena fights through the guard channels. They were taking bets on how quickly you would die. What were the odds? Vector fight was 50-1 against you. By the third trial, it was down to even money. You cost a lot of Kralix their savings. Good, Jess said. Maybe they will think twice before imprisoning logistics officers. As the ship detached from the Kralix station and headed for Coalition space, Jess sat in the operations center and began filing her incident report. The form was standard bureaucratic nonsense, asking for details about mission objectives, complications encountered, and resolutions achieved. She got to the section requesting combat classification update and paused. The form had standard options: non-combatant, support personnel, combat trained, active combat specialist. None of them felt accurate anymore. She clicked Other and typed Battlefield Variable. 3 weeks later, Jess was back at Coalition headquarters, sitting through a debriefing that felt more like an interrogation. 5 admirals, 2 Coalition representatives, and 1 very uncomfortable xenopsychologist all wanted to understand what exactly had happened with the Kralix. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Admiral Chen said, reviewing the report for the 3rd time. You defeated a Kralix officer, survived 3 arena trials, and convinced a militaristic species to reclassify humanity's threat level, all without firing a single shot? Technically, I did not have a gun, so firing shots was not an option, Jess replied. You know what I mean, Lieutenant? Yes, sir. That is an accurate summary. The xenopsychologist, Dr. Ramirez, leaned forward. The Kralix have sent us their updated assessment files. They have flagged humanity as combat methodology unpredictable and recommended all coalition species update their databases accordingly. Do you understand what this means? That I made us look dangerous? That you made us look like we do not play by the rules? Every other species in the coalition has predictable combat doctrines, honor-based, technology-based, biological advantage-based. Humans apparently have whatever works-based doctrine, and that scares them more than superior firepower. Admiral Chen nodded. The Kralix report specifically mentions that you are a logistics officer, not a combat specialist. They are now asking the Coalition for information about human military capabilities because they are concerned that if our non-combatants can do what you did, our actual soldiers must be terrifying. Are we going to tell them? Jess asked. Absolutely not, the Admiral replied. Let them wonder. Uncertainty is better than any weapon we could demonstrate. One of the Coalition representatives, a Vexian named Coordinator Trill, spoke up. This incident has actually improved humanity's standing significantly. 3 other species have reached out requesting formal diplomatic meetings, and the Kralix have proposed a military cooperation agreement. Apparently, they would rather have humans as allies than wonder what we are capable of. So, accidentally getting imprisoned and fighting for our lives was good for diplomacy? Jess said dryly. Unorthodox, but effective. Trill agreed. The debriefing continued for another hour, covering every detail of the incident. When it finally concluded, Admiral Chen asked Jess to stay behind. Off the record, Lieutenant, he said once they were alone. How much of what happened was planned? None of it, sir. I was trying not to die and get Ambassador Pemberton home alive. Everything else just happened. And the fighting style? The improvisation? I took self-defense courses in Academy, learned some asteroid field survival tactics during my first posting. Everything else was just problem-solving with limited resources, which is literally my job description. Admiral Chen smiled. You know what the Kralix are calling you now? In their military channels? I am afraid to ask. The harmless one. It is meant to be ironic. You are their example of why appearances are deceptive and classifications are meaningless. He stood and extended his hand. Good work, Lieutenant. Unintentional, chaotic, and completely against protocol, but good work nonetheless. You are being awarded a commendation for diplomatic service and creative problem-solving. Creative problem-solving is a nice way of saying I made it up as I went along. That is what makes it creative. Jess returned to her quarters and found a message waiting from Commander Thrak. It had come through official Coalition channels, marked as personal correspondence. Lieutenant Carver. The message began. Thrak's translated voice somehow maintaining its gravelly quality even through text-to-speech. I'm sending this to inform you that the Kralix Dominion has updated its training protocols. We are now teaching our warriors to anticipate unconventional combat methods and to never assume non-combatant classifications indicate non-threat status. You have changed how we think about warfare. I am uncertain if I should thank you or curse you for this. Probably both. If you ever return to Kralix space, you will be welcomed as honored guest. Also, I recommend you do not return to Kralix space because many warriors now wish to fight you to test themselves against battlefield variable tactics. This is intended as warning and compliment simultaneously. May your supplies always arrive on schedule. Commander Thrak. Jess read the message twice, smiled, and filed it in her personal archive. Then she opened her duty assignment for the next rotation. Back to logistics, back to shipping routes and supply chain management. Back to boring, predictable, non-combat operations. Perfect. Although she did notice that her new assignment included a security detail twice the size of standard protocol and a note from command that read, in case of diplomatic emergencies, Lieutenant Carver is authorized to resolve situations using any means necessary. Definition of necessary is left to her discretion. Apparently her reputation had preceded her. 6 months later, the Galactic Coalition issued a formal bulletin to all member species. It was buried in routine updates and procedural notices, easy to miss if you were not paying attention. But those who read it carefully found an interesting addition to the threat assessment guidelines. Species, classification. Update, humanity. Previous assessment, unproven. New assessment, established member. Combat doctrine, variable and unpredictable. Recommended approach, diplomatic engagement preferred. Military engagement not recommended without extensive preparation. Note: human non-combatants may possess combat capabilities. Do not assume role designations indicate threat limitations. When in doubt, proceed with caution. And in the database, next to Lieutenant Jessica Carver's name, there was a new designation that had never existed before in Coalition records. Classification, battlefield variable. Threat level, insufficient data. Recommended action, do not provoke. Jess saw the update during a routine database check and laughed. She had gone from unarmed female to galaxy-wide warning label in less than a year. Not bad for a logistics officer who just wanted her supplies to arrive on time. She closed the database and returned to her current task, coordinating fuel deliveries for a mining operation near the Outer Rim. It was boring work, predictable work, safe work, exactly the way she liked it. Because the thing about being classified as a battlefield variable was that nobody wanted to test the classification, which meant she could go back to doing her actual job without anyone starting diplomatic incidents or throwing her into arenas. Although she did keep a bag of sand in her quarters, just in case. You know, for variables.